What I made here was a simple calculator to be used for educational use only, not as a diagnostic tool. But yet we use something called Bayes' theorem in order to determine what is or what shall be the actual chance of an individual having breast cancer after an initial diagnosis. So this includes the false positives. So let's get right into the calculator to be used for educational use only so you can understand exactly how it works. The calculator, for example, this is actually an Excel spreadsheet that any statistician can make, fairly simple. Will be on one of my sites, clinicalnews.org primarily. So if you want to download it, you can utilize it on your own. It's a protected sheet, so you can't mess anything up, except you can input the figures that you need to input. All right, so let us begin. All right, what you see here, for example, is your population size. You see 10,000. You see the 4.14, which is your detection rate, the actual number of cancers detected per 1,000 individuals screened. Your sensitivity, 84.4%. That's actually, the sensitivity is actually detecting the cancers in individuals that have cancer. Did you see those numbers right there? That represents an 84.4%. The recall rate, or initial diagnosis, a false positive, whatever you want to call it, is a 9.6%. These figures you see here all from the National Cancer Institute Breast Cancer Surveillance Consortium, and so it's also required that I state where I get these figures from as well. Green pin, green box; purple pin, purple box; red pin, red pin, red box. All right, per se. So let us begin. So the figure you see right there is out of 999 women. 3.53% of those, or I should say 991 women who receive an initial diagnosis, false or otherwise, only 3.53% of those individuals will actually have breast cancer after an initial diagnosis. And that's a big problem too. If you look down here, they're really concerned, and the reason I'm doing this is because British Medical Journal is highly concerned over the overdiagnosis of breast cancer through mammography, as well as a lot of the charities. For example, the Susan G. Komen site, and I'm just quoting from the site itself and not showing you what it says for copyright reasons. The chance of having a false positive after one mammogram ranges from 7 to 12% depending on your age. Young women are more likely to have a false positive result. After 10 yearly mammograms, the chance of having a false positive is about 50 to 60%. Now I may split little hairs on those figures. For example, the overall average for having a false diagnosis after 10 screenings. The reason I'm saying screenings instead of 10 years is some people don't get screened every other year per se, is 63.55%. The opportunity to receive two false diagnoses is 24.84% of the 10 screenings. And there's actually a chance of receiving three false diagnoses or higher. We're just ended there at 6.35%. Now that's the overall average. Now I'll give you an example of why they don't like to see people get mammograms before the age of 50%. So we're going to stick with population size of 10,000. And there's a reason why you have to have a decent population size, and I'll explain more in a second. I just want to move through this kind of fast. So you take your input figure. Let's take 40 to 44. You see right there. What's the chance of actually have a number of people that actually diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer, out of every 1,000? Read the number there, 1.95. So let's put that number there, 1.95. Now also too, you're going to see all these figures change. There's a Bayes' theorem counter check, and you'll see this number change, as well as the population output, which should stay the same, but I use that to validate the figures here, which should always add to 10,000 if the population size is 10,000. All right, so back to that. 1.95 is the detection rate of 40 to 44. The sensitivity rate is 73.4%. Now I'm doing this so you can utilize this educational tool on your own, should you desire. Sensitivity, or we should say, the recall rate in individuals between the age of 40 to 44 is a staggering 12.5%, resulting in an actual chance of having cancer being 1.13% per every 12,062 individuals that received that phone call. Keeping my personal feelings out of it because, again, some people may see that as being a necessary sacrifice. Others may say the individuals with false diagnosis, or that many people being falsely diagnosed, go through a tremendous amount of suffering and pain in regard to have such little of an outcome. Now, part of the reason I did this again is because, for example, there's a lot of questions of how effective mammograms are overall just to begin with, because, for example, according to the Norwegians, they don't seem to say it makes a difference per se. But that's subjective and not within the realm of the calculator itself. So, to expand, let's go to the age 50 to 54. All right, so let's put the input figure, 50 to 54. What do we want to utilize? Cancer detection rate, 3.54. All right, we utilize, not 3 dash, but 3.54. All right, the sensitivity rate, if you could see it there, 82.6. Now watch all the numbers begin to change. Recall rate of an individual between the age of 50 and 54 is 10%. All right, so we'll just put 10.0. What's the initial chance of having cancer from actual chance of having cancer from initial diagnosis? 2.85%. So you're going to look at 996 false positives per, to be fair, 29 detected, but actually 35 of those individuals have cancer. That brings up the next question. The one thing the Norwegians did for the British Medical Journal was they're also concerned about is the digital mammography. Their concern is by increasing the sensitivity, but not fixing the false recall rate, that they could actually create more damage. Case in point. All right, so let's say, for example, we want to increase the sensitivity. Look at the range. So what, for every 1% recall, you have about 8%. For every 8% increase in sensitivity, there's a 1% increase in recall. All right, so we keep our population at 10,000. So let's increase our sensitivity. Now watch the test positive have cancer, test negative have cancer change. So we go, let's say 92.6. All right. Now, in order to get that 10% extra in the sensitivity, we increase our recall rate, because a lot of things are going to be tested, be seen as cancer, but are not cancer with further diagnosis. Again, for educational reasons only. All right, so what happens is they catch a few additional cancers, but in this case, you'll have additional 1,096 individuals now will have a false negative or get a recall, and it reduces the actual chance of cancer down to basically about 2.9%. Remember, the original figures were 82.6%, and the actual recall rate was actually 10%. So that's the part of the dilemma. Do you increase the sensitivity, catch those individuals which are getting by testing negative but actually have cancer, to increase your testing positive that actually have cancer rate, at the same time exposing an additional 100 individuals or females per se to a false diagnosis. So again, this mammography calculator for educational use only utilizes something called Bayes' theorem, which you can see down there. You can double check. Basically, your opportunity for false diagnosis is based upon a statistical tool called binomial distribution. And I'll have it all there available for you to utilize on your own. Now, this is a caveat. The reason you want to have a decent population size. See the population size right there is 10,000. Let's say reduce the population size down to 100. Now imagine if you're trying to get a drug approval and you're only using 100 individuals, and you have this level of sensitivity. Only seems to work in higher numbers. So let's reduce that population size down to 100 people. Let's see what happens on test positive, cancer, negative, don't have cancer, or negative and no cancer. Let's see what happens. All right, now, when your population size is small, down to 100, you have 10 people that test positive for cancer that don't have cancer at all. And you have no one test positive for cancer. You see, well, that's kind of why you need a large population group. So you go back up to 10,000, and that's what you have. The second problem, which is commonly made by a lot of medical professionals, is this. Also, too, what they'll end up utilizing is only the sensitivity rate, and they will not pay any attention to the cancer detection rate itself. So what they'll do is they'll make a mistake as follows. They'll take the sensitivity rate, they'll make it as an 84.4, because they think that's actually the cancer detection rate. And then they'll make the sensitivity 84.4 at the exact same time. And the recall rate, for example, just to be fair, because we're using averages, is 9.6. So they don't use the actual cancer detection rate per 1,000. They actually pay attention to the sensitivity of the test, and they fail to recognize that that's not actually the detection rate of overall. That's only the sensitivity of detecting cancer in those that actually have cancer, and doesn't take into account false positives and the like. So they'll think there's only a 44.76% chance, so they'll think the odds are actually fairly decent of an individual who receives a positive test result initially of having cancer, when in reality, if we go back to the average real fast before we wrap this up, 4.14, and then you go down to sensitivity of 84.4, which we already have, and the recall rate of 9.6 is 3.53%. And just as a side note, what turned me on to this and utilizing Bayes' theorem, if you want to research it more on your own, is as follows. Basically, if you look right here, there's a wonderful course on essential statistics for data analysis using Excel, which is taught by wonderful instructors, Wayne Winston and Liberty Munson, who basically was Wayne who actually described Bayes' theorem initially in regard to the number of, or the initial cancer diagnosis due to false positives being so low, at least in regard to utilizing Bayes' theorem. And also too, if you want to research a little bit more in regards to what Bayes' theorem actually is, I believe it's called the Veritasium? You could always correct me, called the Bayes trap, which gives a great history in regard to Bayes' theorem itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this educational use only calculator up on clinicalnews.org. You got to download it. Most everyone has Excel. This is probably part of the reason why I did not use Python or R statistics, so to say. So everybody can get a hold of it and utilize it. You can't mess it up. Don't worry, it's password protected. Only the input boxes here will accept any change in figures. Again, this is Ralph Trixiano signing off. Kind of long-winded, but I wanted to do something decent to give an idea of the perspective, at least in regard to Bayes' theorem, of an individual who's receiving a false diagnosis, what their chances may actually be, according to this educational tool, of having actual cancer itself. All the information can be validated. You can find more information on the Susan G. Komen breast cancer site if you like, but it's all there for you to just double check on your own. Any ideas or inputs or any statistical models you think we should use later on, go for it. I also left it too. The reason I didn't do age groups as far as putting in is because the mammographies, enhanced digital mammograms, I did it so you could actually, if they have the same figures per se, recall and sensitivity, you can modify this to utilize those new figures per se, or if there's any improvements in technology. Again, Ralph Trixiano signing off. Thank you very much for listening once again. Long-winded exploration, but the information there for you to utilize, and I'll catch you all again next week. See you then. Bye.